Hello, Internet. So nice to see you. And welcome to another Music Theory Talk. So, if you are watching us, say hi in the comments or chat, say where you are from. I'm always curious to see where you guys are watching us from. And today, we're going to talk about what nobody talks about, rhythm. Everybody, me included, talk a lot about harmony, melody, other things, arrangement, orchestration, scales, chords, etc. Few people talk about rhythm. Why? Because it's really hard to talk about rhythm. That's the problem. Okay, it's really hard to give to explain what you mean. It's really hard to convey the explanation. It's really hard to say something intelligent about rhythm. Okay. Indeed, most of the teachers I've been with always told me, yeah, just work with the metronome and just feel it. Yeah, thank you. Great suggestion, okay. Rhythm should not be so hard, though. That's the thing. Rhythm is hard. Most people get it wrong, but it shouldn't be so hard. So, today, I've invited the expert, okay. That's the guy that wrote a course for my website about rhythm, okay, and if you can find the link in the description of the course. And this guy knows his rhythm, and in some stuff, I mean, he's one of the top guys on this, in my opinion. So, everybody, welcome Mr. Brian Fish.
Hi, Tomas.
Hi, Brian.
Thanks for having me again.
Oh, my pleasure. My absolute pleasure. So, Brian, we were chatting before doing this video, and you were saying that there are things that people should do. Actually, let me step back. You know how people don't know, but we receive a lot of emails, and lots of people ask the exact same question. We call this the frequently asked questions. Okay, but very few people ask what they should ask. Okay, we have a list of the should be asked question that people should ask because the answer will help them, but nobody is asking. Okay, in the same way, everybody's trying to learn or train the rhythm in the same ways, and they're all missing a few things. And that's what we want to talk about today, right? What people should do, but they are not doing.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm going to give you the straight question, and then we go and elaborate. What is it people are not doing, but they should do to understand rhythm?
Okay. One of the first things is they're not taking the time to say the rhythm, either before they play it. What you want to do is you want to practice saying the cadence of a rhythm and get it internalized before you even take it to your instrument. And then a lot of times I'll see people like the rhythm's easy to think about. Like, I understand what a group of four is. I can just play that right now. But until you've practiced saying a group of four evenly over and over, it's not as easy as you think it is. And then as you're transferring it to the guitar, you don't want to stop saying it. You want to play slow enough that you're able to talk your way through that rhythm and actually say the rhythm as you're playing it. If you're not able to do that, you're not playing it slow enough to get started learning that rhythm. So I guess it's really two things there. It's a speed thing, and it's just not willing to take the time to say what you're playing. That's just huge because I see so many people just, oh, I get it, and they start playing, and they don't have it. Just slow down, say what you're supposed to be playing. That's really the number one thing I can think of right now.
Great. So when you say, I mean, I know exactly what you mean. But I know people are at home are thinking, what does it mean? Say the rhythm. Okay. Can you give us a couple of examples so that we have an idea about that?
Sure. If we're working on 16th notes, we can use the Western way of counting. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a... Can I say that? And then if I'm strumming chords, can I do that while I'm going 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a... Or if you don't like that, I personally like using conical syllables. So I'll do takadimi, takadimi. You need something that's a group of four that you can actually feel and internalize. It's not, oh, I understand a four, let's just do four. No, slow things down. and 1. You can even do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. As long as that's within a beat, you want to be able to say something and keep it in time. And even
Exactly.
I can take it one step further than that. And if you're just doing strumming and not doing single notes, talk to your hand. Like literally tell your hand what it's supposed to be doing. So, in most times when I'm playing 16th notes, it's just a down, up, down, up. So if I'm playing all 16th notes, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. If I do an eighth note in 2 16th notes, now it's a down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up. You just start combining those things, and over time, it just you don't even really think about it after a while, but you need to take that initial step of talking your way through a rhythm. Do you have anything to add to that, or
Yes, yeah. Well, yeah. Um, See, it's exactly what you say. Is that people go like, "Yeah, I got it," and they start playing. And I mean, whenever you hear yourself saying, "I got it," and just start playing, alarm bell should go off. Warning, danger, Will Robinson, danger. Okay, because no, you didn't. Okay. I know this of myself. Whenever I find myself like, "I got it," and no, wait. Okay, that's premature. There is no circuit in your brain that can understand rhythm like people think they understand rhythm. People think that we are rhythmic creatures and then we have an instinctive understanding of rhythm. It's actually not true. Okay. What we can do is that we can piggyback on the language circuit, and that's exactly what we're doing. Because when we speak, we have a rhythm in our speaking. And so when we start using syllables, whether we're counting one E and a 2E and a 3E or takadimi, or we use anything else, there is a rhythm in our speaking. So we are piggybacking on the language circuit in your brain to learn the rhythm. But if you're not saying anything to yourself, there is no other circuit in your brain that can do that, even if you feel like there is. That's the thing. That people feel like they're following the rhythm, but in reality, they are not. And the way to understand it is to use a metronome. Okay, meaning the way to test it. You think you got it, start the metronome and play it in time. And if you're not saying it to yourself, like Brian was saying right now, you're gonna go out of time and you're gonna notice. It's even better when you combine the two instruments of the apocalypse, as I call them. Okay, the two hellish instruments. One is the metronome, and the other is your phone. Okay, not gonna show my password, of course. Okay, your phone. What do you do with your phone? You open your phone and you go on the voice memo app or whatever you have on your phone. You start the metronome, you record with the voice memo app, and you play whatever you thought you got, and then you listen back. Because now it's once you listen back to the recording, it's absolutely evident you're going out of time. Okay, so which is, it's not nice to do this to yourself, but it's useful because you understand what's going on. Okay, that's the thing. You have a language circuit in your brain. And I know you have because you're listening to us right now. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here on this live stream. Okay. You can use it to understand rhythm. Now, Brian, why do you think people don't do that? I mean, I have a feeling on what but I want to ask your opinion. Why do you think people just go and don't count?
I think it's a lot of people truly think they have it. They don't see the need for it because maybe they haven't taken the time to record themselves for that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really not hearing what the rest of us are hearing, which is someone playing out of time.
Yes. I also think that a lot of people don't want to be perceived as a beginners, and people think that counting 1E and the 2E, it's a beginner thing to do. So from my part, I'm going to tell you, guys, I've been playing this instrument for decades at this point. Okay, I am a fairly good player and teacher, and I'm still counting most of my rhythm when I play it. Okay, if you ever see me playing live with, I typically play either big bands or musical theater and stuff, and you see me playing live, you can see my mouth moving all the time. Okay, because it's easier to follow the rhythm that way. So it's not a beginner thing. Don't be ashamed of it. Okay. By the way, we have a question here immediately on what something you were saying before, and it's like, is this Konnakol?
Oh, what is Konnakol?
Well,
Konnakol is Indian system of counting. So it comes from the country India, and it's just a different way of counting. It's way more percussive than typical Western counting, and there's advantages to both. But Konnakol, once you get to fairly hard rhythms, is where that's going to really shine and help you out. So, I mean, if we're living in the typical eighth note, 16th note, maybe in the triplet world that most Western music lives in, Western counting works fine. As soon as we start going beyond that, it really starts lacking, and people are always searching for ways to count harder rhythms. And Konnakol is just a way that you can then address those much harder rhythms. It's a very adaptable system.
Could you give us a couple of examples, like without going too much in depth? Because I mean, we know that I've seen your course, and you explain Konnakol in your course, and there's a lot of depth in there. So, but can you just give us just a smidge of it so that we have an idea on how it works?
Sure, I'll just give you the basic syllables for this. So if we're dealing with like one pulse, in this case, we'll think of it as a quarter note. We're just going to say ta, 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 ta. Then if we go to two pulses, and at this point, we're going to assume this is an eighth note. Again, this is flexible. It's not always going to be an eighth note, but for right now it is. We're just going to say ta, ga, ta, ga, ta, ga, ta, ga. Go to triplets. This is where I really like this, because one ia and things like that to me are not easy to count. Or instead you just say takita, 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 takita. And if you're listening the whole time, it sounds very percussive, which I really like that, because rhythm is percussive. Then if we go to a group of four, that's just your takadimi, 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 takadimi. And then again, any of these odds numbers tend to be where Konnakol really helps out a lot. So there's a bunch of things we can do for five, but one of the most common ones to start with is just tadigina dom. So tadigina dom, tadigina dom, tadigina dom, tadigina dom, ta. And that gives you a five with no accent pattern put in it. It's just a straight five that way. So that's a very basic overview, but even just that information there alone is super useful. So.
Yep, that five. I didn't know the five pattern. I forgot about that. Thank you. I'm gonna reuse this immediately, because my previous go-to pattern for five was to tell to myself hippopotamus, okay, which is not very percussive, but it's memorable. But I like your idea better, so I'm gonna use that.
You know, it's hard to fit hippopotamus in when you're doing, you know, one and a hippopotamus. It doesn't flow as nice as the Konnakol syllables.
Yes, exactly. I have here another comment that I'd like to. Well, the questions are starting to become good already. So if you guys have questions, ask in the chat or in the comments. We are going to comment about as many of them as we can. But we were thinking when I said why people are not counting. Warren answered this. It's like, I mean, it was saying because it's hard and say, I mean, for a beginner, it's hard enough getting your hands to make chords. Rhythm is a lot more mental bandwidth. And Warren here is exactly hitting it, okay? Because there is an assumption behind this question. And the thing is that most people are learning rhythm this way. First, they learn the G chord or something else. And maybe another chord, too. And then they are trying to learn the rhythm while switching the chords or holding the chords. And you see that Brian is already going like, yes, that's what they do. Okay. So here is another thing that musicians should do, but they don't, which is, Brian, that they should.
They should separate those skills.
Exactly.
So you work on your chord changes, which are difficult. You can do that with something as easy as just whole notes or no timing if it's really hard. So you start off with your chord change on G, hold it for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You've got 4 whole beats to get your hand to go to C. Okay, then whatever rhythm you eventually want to put with that chord change, you're now going to mute your strings with your fretting hand, and you're just going to practice the rhythm in isolation. And eventually you're going to get really good at your chord changes. You're going to, in the meantime, be really good at the rhythm. And when it's time to put those two together, it's so much easier. Instead, you're fighting yourself trying to learn two things at the same time, and you're not going to get either down as good as you could, just because, again, you're splitting your focus completely. So you need to isolate those skills. And unfortunately, most people don't isolate rhythm. They're focused on their chords, they're focused on their scales. And oh yeah, there's this rhythm thing I'm throwing on top of that too. No, focus on rhythm. And you can even do, if you're doing arpeggiated patterns with your picking hand, you can sit there with muted strings, just practice what strings you're supposed to be hitting in time. That type of practice is so important to do, and it speeds up the process of learning the guitar by a lot.
Isolation. That's the secret. Well, one of them. You guys, if you're learning a rhythm and you're having difficulties, you're doing too many things at the same time. Forget about the complex scale pattern. Forget about switching the chord. Forget about everything. Just do that. Again, I think that's one thing most people don't do because they think it's too much of a beginner thing. I mean, even Warren right now is commenting that he's teaching his 8-year-old dad guitar, so he's reminded me of things I forgot about being a beginner. That's correct, but Warren, I think that's not a beginner thing. I mean, I'm doing it all the time. I mean, maybe you can call me a beginner, I don't know. But I'm doing this all the time. Whenever I find a difficult rhythm, first, I study just the rhythm, okay? Forget about the chords, forget about everything else. Even if I know the chords really well and they're not that complex, I'd rather isolate the whole thing so I can concentrate 100% of my mental power on the rhythm, get that done, and move on.
Yeah, that's how you install the feel. I mean, people always say play rhythm by feel. It doesn't just magically happen. It happens by doing what you're talking about. You're taking the time to repeat that enough times that you're no longer thinking about it. Now it's feeling natural. And now it's time to add in those other elements. So everyone's just in a hurry to do everything at once. And it makes it take way longer to learn that way.
Yes. Yes. I'm going to coin a phrase here, is that feeling natural is not a natural feeling. Meaning, like you were saying, the rhythm feels natural only if you trained it, only if you break it down, practiced it, okay. And at the beginning, it doesn't feel natural. And then with repetition, it starts to feel natural. Whenever you see people playing great things and you ask them and they say, yeah, it just feels natural, that's not a natural feeling. It doesn't happen. It's not talent. It's not, you have to install it by practicing. Okay, so nobody feels bad, please, if you're like, I don't have any natural feeling. Yeah, guess what? Nobody has a natural feeling at first. Okay, I've taught, at this point in my career, I taught a few thousand students, in person, online, and I mean, a few thousand only in person, then the online. I've never, ever seen somebody who, as a beginner, when they were starting, had a good rhythm feeling. Nobody. Never happened. Doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Okay, doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter the gender, doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Okay, everybody think they have a fairly good natural feeling. Nobody does. When I discovered mine, it was a shock. Like, I thought I was playing in time, and I wasn't. So, everybody has to practice this. It's just, guys, don't feel bad if you're out of time, and if you think you're in time, check. But those are things nobody does about rhythm. First thinking, hey, maybe I don't have it, and then actually checking. Okay. That's an interesting question we have here. So I'm gonna put this on, and I'm asking you, Brian, what do you think of that? Does counting replace tapping your foot, or you do both?
I do both. So that's, to me, the tapping the foot, that is the beat. And then the rhythm is what we're learning to say over the top of that beat. So I need a beat reference. And I could rely on my metronome or drum machine, but I want to be making that myself. Because if I'm not making that beat myself, I'm not getting the full benefit out of that. So you need to be keeping that time.
Yes, exactly. I like to do both too. And the foot helps a lot because it's a physical motion that happens together with the playing. What I found is that once you get used to tap your foot and count and play at the same time, which I mean, I know it's hard, okay, because there's many things going on. But once you get used to synchronize the things, whenever you are in a live playing situation, you just synchronize your foot with the kick drum of the drummer, and then automatically you are in time. Everything else just follows. But if you never train that foot moving, then it doesn't happen. I mean, you need to purposefully put your foot tapping in your practice for this to happen. And this is super useful, especially if you have songs where the drummer is speeding up or slowing down or changing time, because you just think, synchronize the foot, and everything else just follows. So, I mean, that's what I found. I guess the problem here is I'm trying to read beyond the question here. Because the question is, does counting replace tapping your foot? Or you do both? And I think it's revealing that people ask me about, I mean, this verb, replace, I've heard it so many times in this context. So why would one thing replace the other? Okay. Why not both? Okay. I mean, it's curious. It's like people are trying to, I mean, I'm not talking about you specifically, grain of sound, okay? But in general, people are trying, like, can I just tap the foot? Can I just count? Can I just do one of those things rather than doing both? And I'm like, why? It's probably easier, but do both. It works best. At least that's what I think. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, we're hitting our instrument. So technically, in my mind, we're a percussion instrument. Okay. I know we get to play chords and stuff, but with this hand, at least with your strumming hand, we're striking that thing. So I want my bass drum playing in time. Like you said, live with the bass drummer, I want my foot playing in time. And drummers are doing all kinds of stuff over the top of that. They're keeping time as well. We need to treat it the same way. So our foot's doing one thing, this limb's doing something, this limb's doing something. It all needs to eventually happen. And if you slow things down enough and work on those things in isolation, it's possible for anyone. I only know that because my timing was terrible when I started. And the longer you work on this stuff too, with rhythm, you're unfortunately, never satisfied either. You can always refine things more and more. So that's where thinking of this as a beginner, you're never done. You're always getting more and more picky towards your own playing and the people around you too. Because there's people I could have played with when I first started off that were fine, that would drive me insane if I tried to play with them now because they haven't gone through the same process I have. So that's
Oh yes, oh yes. It's the better you become at rhythm, the more refined your ear becomes, because that's how you become better at rhythm. It's a perceptual thing. You do the repetition and you start realizing that, hey, there's this little difference. I could play just early and a little bit late and all this kind of thing. And so you become more sensitive to the exact rhythm. And you don't notice how much it changes in time, but in 2 or 3 months, it can change a lot, your perception of rhythm. And then you go and listen to the people you were playing before, and that happens, and you cannot play with them. Or you happen to listen to some old albums, and then you realize those people were completely out of time, and I never realized. Okay, and there are albums that I love when I was a teenager. I can't listen to them anymore because they're all over the place. At the same time, there are albums that I didn't understand when I was a teenager that now sound amazing. So that's the stuff that happens when you become a musician in general. Okay. And incidentally, I just want to make to remark how important is this by telling you guys my 3-point rule to get a gig. Some people have heard this already, but if you want, if you're auditioning for a band, for a show or something, I found that there are 3 things you need to do to get the gig. As surprising as it seems, if you do those 3 things, you get the gig most of the time because other people are not doing them. The first thing you need to do, brace yourself, is to show up. It seems like a stupid thing, but you know how many times I told me I don't even show up at the audition. We have like 15 players, and then I was the only one there, and I got the gig. Okay, it happened, and they paid really well, by the way, on that gig. So, 2, tune your guitar. It will seem obvious, but 3, play in time with the drummer. If you don't play in time with the drummer, now the drummer has to not only shoulder the burden of keeping the time, even the bass player, but also they have to try to tune you out because you're getting out of time. So the drummer is not happy, and the drummer knows, and he's going to tell the people to not hire you. But if you follow the drummer, and when the drummer changes tempo, you follow the drummer because your tempo is solid, your rhythm is solid, you are the only person for the gig. Okay, those 3 things will get you the gig 99% of the time. It's surprising. It's like, but what if I can play this? What if I can play that? If you don't do those 3 things, everything else you can play is useless. They just don't want you. Okay. The 1% are the gigs where you need to be a very, very, very good player. And then you need to do other stuff. But believe me, guys, get those 3 things down. Playing in time is the most important thing. Period. Okay.
Yes, you want to be the drummer's best friend.
Yes.
You really do. You want to be the guy that he's like, I like playing with him because I don't have to worry about time. And then you're the guy who gets called.
Exactly, because they call the drummer, and the drummer goes, "That's the guy I want to play with." So you get called every single time. Exactly. Now, and by the way, since we were talking about tapping the foot and saying the syllables, the struggle is real. I can't chew gum and play guitar at the same time. You and me alike, buddy. I can't either. That's disadvantages. You know,
slow, you'll get it.
Yeah, no, you can. Okay, you can learn, but you know, for the longest time, whenever I had music in my headphones, I had to walk, for instance, exactly at the tempo of the song, which was incredibly inconvenient. It took me a while to disassociate the walking from the rhythm. Okay, so yeah, this stuff happens. So, but I mean, anyway, let's see. We have a few other questions here. Okay. But let's go and talk more about what are other things that people should not do, but they are not doing in learning rhythm.
Well, a lot of people try to tackle an entire measure of rhythm at the same time. And what you want to do is you want to look at each individual piece that makes up that rhythm, and can you play that in isolation? If you can play that rhythm in isolation, then fantastic. Move on to the next part, the next part, the next part. Now, if you've been doing this for a long time, you can look at a whole measure and play it. It's not that big of a deal. But when you're starting, so we were talking about 16th notes earlier. Can I play the 4 16th notes? Can I play the 8th note and 2 16th notes? Can I reverse that? Play the 16th and an 8th note. Within that, do I know what the 2 8th notes sound like in isolation? Then you take each of those things, and then you start, once you can play those in isolation, then you start mixing 2 of them. And then you start mixing 3 of them. And then you start mixing those 3 up in different ways. And the more you do that type of work, the easier it is to play through a full measure. But everyone's just trying to plow through and learn all that stuff in one sitting. And instead of just breaking things apart into small sections and then slowly piecing it back together. And if you build that way, you're going to be able to play things way more complex than you think you can, because it just becomes these little cells of rhythm that you're playing from, and you can just mix and match those any which way you want after you've been doing it long enough. So just being willing to break things apart. It's really almost the same as before, as far as just trying to dive in and play it. You just need to take your time and work your way through it, and the more you do that, the easier it gets.
Yeah, it's another thing that looks like a beginner move because, I mean, of course, I'm an advanced player. I can do the whole bar or even the whole piece without thinking. But in reality, it's much easier if you break it down. Much easier if you break it down. You see, that's one of the things why I recommend people when you're practicing, there should be nobody around. Nobody, not your girlfriend or wife, not your dog or cat, nobody. So you are free to do all those beginner moves and without being ashamed of anybody hearing you. Okay.
And
When I
not
practice,
you're really going to play that again?
yeah, so you're gonna play that
Please,
again, exactly.
please.
Didn't you get it? I mean, I got it. And right, you need to be able to do all the repetitions and break things as stupid as they are in very, very little pieces and repeat that. And so you don't want to have anybody around. The moment you have anybody around, it's not a practice, it's a performance. Okay, so. But yeah, people don't do that because they think it's too easy, too beginner. Guys, don't be afraid to break things down until they're easy. It doesn't matter how much you have to break them down or how slow you have to play them or what you have to say at the same time to get them, or to write things down on a piece of paper in front of you so you don't have to keep thinking about that, etc., etc. So, yeah, that's the idea. Good. Anything else, Brian? I know you have a list of things. So
Well, yeah,
just
well, kind of ties in with what we were just talking about, but it's well, if you get it once, it doesn't count. Okay. We're going for 9 out of 10. We're going for a large number of correct rhythms in a row. If you just get it once, it's not, I mean, it's a good feeling. We got it once, but it's not time to celebrate. That's actually when the work begins. Okay, we now have an idea of what this sounds like. How many times can I reproduce this same rhythm and how accurate is it every time? And again, you can be doing that in isolation. I would do that a lot in isolation, honestly, and then add back in the notes, the chords, the things like that on top of it. But so many people just think, "Oh, cool, I got it. What's new? Show me something else." It's like, wait a second, you just got started learning this. You're not even close to having that down. It's the repetitions that have to go into learning anything.
yeah, it's the first phase of learning. The first you go from not being able to do it once. Then you're able to, you try to make this more consistent, so get it a second time, a third time, and until it's consistent. And then you try to get it so that it's natural and you don't have to think about it. So just getting it once means, I mean, it's a milestone, but it's definitely not the end of the journey. Okay, so I have a good question here that it feels funny to say. It doesn't feel funny at all, but playing rests is hard. Oh yes, it is. It's actually harder to play a rest than everything else. With a pendulum strum, it becomes all about left hand muting. Yes, you could. That's one way. But yeah, it's much harder to play a rest because you have to not take an action as opposed to take an action, and your brain your brain does not have the word not inside. Okay, it's very hard to say now stop. Okay, rests are the hardest thing, and you notice because lots of beginning musicians don't play any rest. Okay, you guys have ever noticed how professional solos this way, no? Beginner solo this way. Hey, the beginners cannot take a rest. It's hard. Okay, it's hard physically. It's hard psychologically. So yes, and this is true in rhythm too. And that's why, by the way, we first typically study rhythms that have no rests so that we get the idea, like takadimi, 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 and then you learn to do the same rhythm with rests. Ta 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 dimita dimita dimita. Okay, so because you need to first learn the natural way and then gradually do the rest. Or at least that's what I think. But the expert is here. how do you proceed to learn those rests?
Oh, exactly how you just said. No, you learn the full rhythm, and then you learn that rest means silence, and we're trying really hard to make no sound come out of the guitar. Sometimes in a live playing situation, that's a little hard. As you're muting your strings, you'll hear a little percussive clip on the strings, but you're trying to make that as short as possible too. You're literally trying to play silence or play nothing, which is way harder than anyone thinks it is. And then, especially if you're not used to paying attention to that too. If you see a rest and you just let your chord ring through and the whole band stopped and your chord's still ringing, it makes the whole band sound bad. So really pay attention to those rests. And it's some in the left hand and then some in the right too. Sometimes when I'm strumming, it's almost like a little karate chop motion where this goes across and it's stopping that. I'm ready for whatever the next strum is. So there's the little click that you're trying to make as short as possible.
Yep. Yeah, see, that's the other thing is, one thing, it's holding the note, and the other thing is cutting the notes and having the actual rest. And yes, you need to know which is which because it sounds different. There is here another comment that we're talking about again, how to count the rhythm, etc. And one great reason to read music notation. What do you think of that?
Well, reading notation, reading rhythms, yes. You should absolutely be able to read rhythms because then you can write down the rhythm you played. But reading notation, it depends on what I'm going to do. So if I'm playing in the cover band I play in, there's no need to read notation ever. Whereas if I've got a gig like Tommaso has where I'm reading charts for like a play or a musical or something like that, then you absolutely have to at least read at a certain level. Still going to be lots of chord charts, but there will be some single note lines that you need. So if you're talking about reading rhythms, then yes, that's really important. As far as reading the rest of notation, that depends on what you're doing and what you want to do. What is your goal?
Mm-hmm. Well, the trick if you have a reading gig and it's mostly chord charts with some single note lines, the trick there is to, once you get the scores, because they give you the scores well before the show, go and listen to the original recordings, have a look at what is happening, and learn those single line parts beforehand. Okay, so you know what's happening as opposed to read them at the first reading. Also because some of them are not really guitar friendly sometimes, so you need to adapt a few things. But definitely knowing the rhythm notation helps. Now, on the other hand, I noticed that a lot of people are thinking in a similar way regarding rhythm or fretboard knowledge, meaning they're like, yeah, the best way to learn rhythm is to learn to read music, or the best way to understand your fretboard is to learn to read music. And I'm thinking, this is completely backward. You should understand rhythm, and rhythm has nothing to do with notation per se, because it's a feeling you have when you play your instrument. And you should understand your fretboard, which has nothing to do with notation, because notation is just signs on a paper. Then, once you have those skills, you learn how to read, because you are connecting those skills with the sign on the paper. If you're trying to learn notation first, you have to learn the signs on the paper, the feeling of rhythm, and your fretboard, so what are the notes, all at the same time, and it is really hard, okay? So, in my opinion, actually, it's backward. You should learn the skills first, and then learn to read, and then learning to read. Once you have the skills, once you know where the notes are, this is a C, this is a D, this is an E, and so on and so forth. And once you have a basic feeling of rhythm, so you can follow a pulse, reading is not that hard, because you already have everything. You just need to say, okay, so that sign on the paper is this. It's played for that long. But notation is hard because most people are starting from there, and they're trying to learn all those things piled on top of each other. And so, of course, they're like, oh my God, I have to see that and find this and be in time, and too many things. So like we were saying before, we want to isolate those things, okay? Now, that's very unpopular advice, apparently, because everybody's like, no, you need to learn notation as soon as possible. If you not know how to read, you're not a good musician. Guys, let me tell you, I know lots of professionals that play live and in studio, and they cannot read a note on the score, a single one. And they play great. I know some people who don't read the score, but they can fake score reading very well. Okay, meaning they studied the score before. Okay, or they play something better than what it's on the score because they are great at listening and improvising and all this kind of thing. When I started myself in the business of live playing, for instance, I couldn't read a note, but they got me because I was listening to everybody else and finding out what to play. So. See, that's the thing. Okay.
Just learning a language. As far as a kid, you don't make the kid sit there and learn to read before they start talking. They're going to be talking long before they're introduced to the written word. So it's really you need to approach it the same way.
Yes, and not only that, but if you've ever seen a kid learning how to speak, the first thing they do is ta 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 ba 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 na 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 na. It's like Konnakol, okay? Learning the rhythm first, okay, and then later they start the pa ta ba pa ta da ba ba, okay, and try to mix the syllables, and then they try different rhythms. It's a long time before they actually see a sign on the paper. And that should be the same for us, honestly. That's the thing. Okay. I have a question here that I'd like to address before we move forward. Like, would you repeat or even better demonstrate exactly how you check your rhythm via recording yourself? I'm not sure I understand the process. Okay. Demonstrate is going to be hard because with all the filters of the live streaming, if I put the metronome on, you're probably not going to hear it because the filter is taking away all the noise from the microphones, and this is considered noise to most filters. So, but what I'm going to do is this: you're going to start your phone, take a phone or anything, and go on the voice memo app, okay, or anything that can record something, an audio, okay. Put this on your table, start recording. Then start the metronome at the speed you want to play and play your part on the guitar. So your phone is just recording you and the metronome at the same time. Then stop everything, stop the metronome, stop the recording, stop playing, and listen back to what you just recorded. And listen if you are in time with the metronome or not. Hint, if it's the first time you're doing, you're not. Guaranteed. Okay. And then you start listening and you're trying to understand, am I early? Am I late? Am I completely out? Okay. And then you do it again and again and again and again. Like Brian was saying, it's not just because you get it right once that works. So you have to first do it until you get it. And then you have to do it again and again and again and again until you can do it consistently. To give you an idea on what this means is when one of my teachers made me notice that I was speeding up, I was accelerating my playing, so I was going out of time. It took me a couple of days to actually notice that, recording, etc. I had to listen for a couple of days to like, okay, no, it's true, I am speeding up. And then it took me 8 months of daily doing this exercise for 15, 20 minutes. So play something, record, listen back, play something, record, listen back, and do some critical listening. And I was able to play in time by the second week, but I was able to do it consistently only after 8 months. So most of the work is in the consistency part, not in the being able to get it once part. But after those 8 months, you put me in a room with a drummer, and the drummer could do anything, and I was playing in time with them. So that's my experience. You have a similar experience, Brian?
Yeah. So one little thing you can do, I mean, you can even do that when you're at the counting level too. Like if you want to hear when I'm saying takadimi is the ta hitting right on the click of the metronome. If you're having really struggling with rhythm, you can do that. And when you're listening back, for me, if I close my eyes, I hear better. You take away one of those senses. So I'll do that a lot when I'm listening back. Just I'm not distracted by whatever's going on around me. Close your eyes, and all of a sudden you hear more things than you would if your eyes were open. So that's the only little thing I would add there, is just take away that extra sense, and your hearing magically gets better. So that works too if you're having a hard time in a live situation. So, close your eyes. You're really getting into your playing. No, I'm trying to figure out who's completely off around me here. So
yes, yes. That's that's the thing in live situations. Sometimes you cannot hear yourself. Sometimes you cannot hear other people. Sometimes you hear other people going completely out of time, and you need to tune them out. And the more solid your sense of rhythm it is, the better, because you're gonna. I mean, it's best if your sense of rhythm is so solid that you need to use only 20% of your rhythm sense to play the gig, because occasionally you need to use 100% when something happens, the drummer starts in the wrong beat or stuff like that, and you need to navigate the situation. You need more. So leave yourself a buffer, essentially. Leave yourself some headroom in your rhythm skills. Don't always play the hardest thing you can play. Okay, Brian, what? So we have addressed the idea of counting, the idea of separating rhythm from anything else, so working only on the rhythm, the idea of breaking the rhythm apart rather than doing it a whole bar or a whole piece at a time, just a little, one beat or even less to get the right part. What else can we do to train our rhythm?
once you have a rhythm down, apply it to as many things as you can. So whether you're just writing random chords down, playing it with that, or if you take that rhythm, if you're able to read the rhythm, can you write some guitar licks? How many can you write 10 guitar licks based around that rhythm that you're going to play? Not that you have to memorize these things forever. This is an exercise. So if one of them is great, then fantastic. Put it in your vocabulary, and then learn how to mess with that on top of that. But it's just taking the time to play more with their rhythm. So for me, the things I use all the time, I'm strumming, I'm doing soloing ideas or melody ideas, and I'm doing arpeggiated type picking all the time. So almost any rhythm I've learned, I'm going to take it through at least those steps. And if I have a job where I need to do more than that, then I'm going to write for those skills as well. So it's just make sure you apply it to your skill set as soon as you possibly can, and as many ways as you can.
Exactly. Now, so the example would be if you have a strumming pattern like this, the campfire song strumming pattern. Okay, you can create. You can create a little soloing or something with that, and then maybe you can create some riffs or some other things. So don't just limit yourself to the strumming when you learn a rhythm. Or if you learn the rhythm somewhere else, try to do it on strumming. So the idea is to apply the same abstract rhythm to several different situations on the instrument, soloing, rhythm playing, or maybe power chords. Okay, just so you know this rhythm and not just that specific situation. I have a question on what we were talking about before about recording the rhythm. Is it like we play our guitar and keep metronome on and then later see if we're on time or not, or we have to strum pick at metronome beat? Both. It's both things. You could play, you could strum pick exactly on the metronome beat, tack, 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 tack. Or you could play any rhythm, but just keep the metronome on, make sure that you're playing that rhythm in time with the metronome. It's both. And by the way, if you have other interpretation, it's those two. Okay, meaning you cannot do this exercise wrong. Put on a metronome, play something, turn on the recording. You know if it's in time or not. Okie dokie. So all the suggestions you gave us today are very simple to implement. Some people could even say they are obvious, but the thing is, nobody's doing them, right?
Yes. Not enough people. Yes.
Yes, and not enough people for not enough time either. I mean, I know that occasionally, I don't do them either. I have a little. I used to have. I should probably do it again. I had a little sticky note taped in front of me when in my practice place, and it's like, if it's too hard, you're trying too much. Meaning, if I'm trying to play something and I get it wrong 3 or 4 times, it's because I'm asking too much of myself. And it doesn't matter how simple it may look. Okay, I had to break it down. I have to break it down. I noticed that guitar players, have a really hard time with that. They always try to play the whole thing together, the whole song, okay, or the whole riff, or the whole, and they never break it down into rhythm and notes or just this beat, etc. So those suggestions, guys, may sound obvious. And probably they are obvious, actually. Okay, if you think about it. The value is not so much in that. The value is in when you're actually practicing, you should actually use this stuff. It's just doing it, okay? Which is the hardest thing, essentially. But they are so important because those suggestions are simple, but they make a big difference. Learning rhythm, it's something that sounds simple. Again, not really. But once you get it, everything else sounds better. Everything else sounds better. It may sound, what I'm going to say right now, I know I'm going to have a lot of people telling me that's absolutely not true. Okay, but hear me. I once heard 2 different players playing through the exact same rig. My rig, incidentally. Okay, my gear. So I gave my guitar to 2 different players. We were just at a gig and we were just discussing a few things. One of them was playing in time and the other was not playing exactly in time. And I can tell you, the tone of the guitar, when of the guy who was playing in time was much better than the guitar tone of the guy playing out of time. And they were playing the exact same guitar, but not this, the other one, but to the exact same rig, and it didn't change anything. And they were picking pretty much with the same energy. Okay, it was just that the perceived tone was way better. Rhythm, I mean, rhythm shouldn't influence tone. That those seems like completely different things. But perceptually speaking, for a human being, when you play things in time, your guitar sounds better. It's just that. It's incredible. But I mean, don't believe me, do the test. Okay, ask 2 different people, one that you know doesn't play in time, one that you know plays in time, to play the same thing, and tell me if the tone is not different. Of course, I mean, if you record it, or put it through a spectrum analyzer, the tone is exactly the same. But perceptually speaking, it sounds better. So, don't buy another pedal. Don't buy another amp. Buy a metronome. Okay, and use it. Okay, and you see your tone is way, way better. I mean, I know this is very unpopular to say because people are like, no, tone is not in the fingers, tone is in the gear, tone is this, you need to buy this and that, you need to have the right tube bump. And guys, tone is in the rhythm. Okay, tone is in the rhythm. That's the thing. Okay, you have anything you want to say, Brian, right now, and then we're gonna show people what you got, because I know you have stuff for us. But there's anything you want to say before?
Just a little thing, you sort of mentioned it, is just make rhythm part of your practice. Schedule it into your practice, because if not, you're probably not going to do it. Because there's things that sound a lot more fun than this. But the thing is if you put this in your practice, everything you do is more fun because you sound better.
Yes, exactly. Now I have a comment here that Brian's rhythm class has been good for me. I neglected rhythm studies for so long. I was starved for rhythmic variety, and I studied rhythm on my own for a year and made less progress. So Brian offers. Say that again.
I love hearing that. That's awesome.
Yes. Brian offers rhythm classes, and you guys can get your feet wet and then get the right thing later. So Brian, what do you have for us? Let me put some stuff here. The first thing you have for us is this.
Yes, it's a free resource. And it's just going to really take you through the steps we just talked about, but you're going to see me on screen walking you through the exact steps we just talked about. So if you had questions as far as, how do I play along with the metronome, you're going to see it right in this video. If you weren't sure on some of the steps I talked about, you're going to see step by step breaking a rhythm down and making it playable in the exact steps you should be taking any rhythm you're working on through to really master it and get it down. So, and again, that's a free resource.
It's a completely free resource. You can get it in 2 minutes. You can, in less, 1 minute, you can get there, get it, and be watching this. And then later, or not later, immediately too, if you guys want to go beyond and take what Warren was taking before, that's the thing. Brian?
Yes, and that just takes everything so much further. It's really, rhythm is one of the greatest things to create with. And there's all kinds of things I'm going to show you how to create with rhythm. You're going to get into all kinds of, from easiest rhythm to some very, very advanced rhythms. And we break it down into small steps to make sure that you understand it. There's all kinds of examples throughout the whole thing. And I show you how to take the ideas I give you, and then you can go ahead and make your own ideas from all the material in there. So you'll be able to look at any rhythm or hear any rhythm and know exactly what's going on.
So if you guys did not get anything yet, get the free thing and start to see how Brian is teaching, and then maybe you can get the ultimate rhythm mastery. If you already have the 6 easy steps, go and get immediately ultimate rhythm mastery. Okay, it's a great course. I cannot say anything else. I mean, it's just go and get it, and then you see how getting your rhythm under control changes everything in your playing for the better. So, think our time is up. Thank you, Brian, for coming today.
Thanks for having me. This is always fun.
Always a pleasure to have you. And then again, rhythm is one of my favorite things to talk about because nobody talks about that. And then everybody out there on YouTube is afraid to tell people all those suggestions because they know that there's going to be an army of trolls telling that this is obvious, tell us something new. But this is the stuff that works. So
it's the stuff that great players are still doing to this day.
Exactly. Exactly. So you guys do that. You can take what we said here. You can get the 6 easy things by 6 easy tips by Brian, and you're gonna get more. You can get the ultimate rhythm master and get even more. You guys decide how much you want to get, but do something for your rhythm because it changes the way you play and it makes you, I mean, everything you play sounds better once you get control of rhythm. Even if you think your rhythm is great, there is a margin of improvement. There is always a margin of improvement, and it does make a difference. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody. A pleasure having all of you guys here. And until next time, enjoy.